Hey everyone, it's Matt over at webgamesetcetera.com. I'm the creator, and this is my second video looking at creating this title from scratch with this idea of getting away from the default look and feel of RPG Maker web graphics. After being out of Flash game development for a while, I started looking around for an engine that didn't have a super steep learning curve, that had a lot of accessibility to all of the different things that I wanted to do. And I think RPG Maker Web is actually kind of overlooked for its diversity as an engine. It's got so much going on for it. The more you get into it, and of course, it's based on JavaScript. So if there's stuff you want to get in there and tweak yourself, you can. But whenever I participated in an RPG Maker game jam, I was kind of disappointed about how they all looked the same and how they were all obviously using the same graphics. And I got to the point where I was like, oh yeah, there's that character. Oh yeah, there's that bookshelf. Oh yeah, there's that graphic that everybody's using. And I started thinking about a title of a specific game storyline that would take place with these graphics that just kind of defied not only the default look and feel, but defied one of the things that I kind of feel is weird about the way the characters look in the world. And it was brought up actually here by Finival, who is on the RPG Maker web forum, which I've gotten more involved with recently. And he says it's unique for sure. However, it doesn't look right within the chibi characters, and the proportions are a bit off in multiple places. And thanks for that comment. I addressed that in depth a little more here on the RPG Maker web forum. And I'd like to bring it up here, where obviously these sizes seem kind of weird. These books seem huge in relation. And one of the things that I always felt kind of weird about with the RPG Maker default graphics and the way it handled the sprites and what they're calling this, this chibi character, which I, can only assume is the big anime eyes and the big round head that's, 50 to 60% of the body perspective. And, then they're going through doors that are the exact same size as them, and houses are all, 2 people tall, and trees are all 2 people tall. And but when you get into the carriage, of course, the carriage is a 48 by 48 sprite, so it's 1 person tall. And there is this kind of perspective limitation that you give yourself to accept the game proportions. You just kind of just your brain says, well, this is what I have to deal with, so we're going to look at everything this way. And I kind of wanted to turn around and blow that up, and use their kid-like proportions with their big heads, and turn around and scale everything else out equally, So it's kind of like that childhood reference where your room is really, really big and the bookcase is really, really big. And then you come back as an adult and that bookcase is actually just, 3 feet tall, and, it's just a little tiny room. But when you're down there and you're small and your head is half your body size, everything else in perspective looks so much bigger and so much grander. And so, notwithstanding, some items that you might actually interact with like this little book right here and this little cup of tea that actually is in perspective to the character, the few things that you might interact with might actually be rendered in your size. But everything else kind of has this faux proportion bigness, this largesse as built into the design of it. And at the time, I imagined it kind of like a Dr. Seuss meets Bill Sienkiewicz, uh, but this is obviously toned down a lot more from that. And then, so thanks for that observation, because that gave me a chance to talk about that a little bit. And I'm glad that somebody else is seeing that perspective and thinking, well, that's not right. Well, look at the RPG Maker default stuff. That's not right either. I just went in a different way with accommodating the proportions and the perspective. And so the second thing I thought after I posted that first video, where I felt like I actually made some progress in these layouts. I felt like they could be, map rooms in a game. I thought, okay, well, how am I going to stock the characters that I need in this world? Um, how am I going to, make that happen and make it look right? Uh, and I had already created one character. I had already created one um, sprite from scratch. I called it Crabomination, and it debuted in the game jam, the uh, the game jam that I just did for RPG Maker Web, which was a small town shutdown, which was a game jam where everything had to happen on one map. There wasn't any travel allowed because we were all sheltering in place for the quarantine. I used this character in that game, and as happy as I was with it, it took a long time to make because you don't just make one character. You make all these different permutations of this character. It's got to have all of the different walking directions, and then I'm a fan of the action with the side character, the side battler, side view battler. I'm a fan of that, and so you've got to have three animation for every one of those actions. And whenever you're talking about a title series that's probably going to have all these different little characters in it, creating all that from scratch, I sat down and started through some of that and just realized it wasn't going to be scalable. It wasn't going to be possible for one guy and the amount of time that I have and the other things I want to do at the same time as all this is going on. So I was thinking about all of this, and of course, I got another wise observation from somebody who's thinking the same thing. Lex Alolia here is saying, "I'm intrigued by the visual, but I feel you need a different sprite than the default style to really make it work." And so, thank you very much for that observation. It's echoing what's going on in my own brain chamber. How am I gonna make uh, these sprites and make them look like they're in my world and make them look original enough, uh, uh, and ultimately, have to rely on the character generator that is provided by RPG Maker Web. Because at the end of the day, I'm just not going to be able to create 56 different, combat sprite animated, 12 different direction walking sprite animated for every single one of these guys that I'm going to need. And so, one of the characters I knew I was bringing back right away from Small Town was Smitty, the metalsmith, and I had used this default uh, character that had been provided with RPG Maker. And you cannot generate this head. You can't make this nose. These eyes, are more shallow than the anime eyes. So how was I going to be able to, create a sprite, and have it be who I wanted? And in researching blacksmiths and metalsmiths, of course, there's all these, fantasy images of these guys with their shirt off, and that plays to, the current of homosexuality that, is the character Smitty, you know. So I, started with rendering a character that looked a little bit like what Smitty looked like. And then, I made his eyes shorter and I made his nose narrower and picked it up a little bit and then started coloring these bands and, gave him a little bit more butt cheek and highlights and gave him nips. And, and I took the default head that got generated, and I cut the shoulders on him, and then I took Smitty's head and I cut his head off and put it on his shoulders. So now I got my face along with my metalsmith with no shirt on. And I went through and recolored his skin a little bit. I'm probably going to go back now and color the face, add a little more muscle in him, get a little more soot and black on his face. But this is, I went from, the chibi character with the great big anime eyes, and, colored in the body parts and colored in more, you know, butt on him, and colored in, kind of these darker highlights and tried to get away from what that generic looked like. Um, and I knew I wanted a captain of the guard and a guard. I knew I wanted police detail, but you can't really generate these colors. These are default ones that are these characters. can't generate in the generator with these clothes, so you kind of have to accept what it comes with. And so I have been doing a lot of pixel coloring tutorials, a lot of pixel drawing tutorials. If you haven't checked it out, I have been getting a lot of tutorial from Pixel Pete. Pixel Pete, yeah, and he's got a big giveaway going on right now. Dwarve, his little indie game. Oh, Lit Mobile, shut up. His Dwarve independent game has got a giveaway going on right now. He's just extended it through the end of May, so you can still get in on that. But I've been watching a lot of those kind of pixel coloring videos. I've been looking at a lot of pixel art tutorials, and I've been going through and recoloring these guys and repainting these guys and getting them all on the same palette. So this is an example, Smitty's an example of taking some default assets and changing them up and then creating a character to fit that and going through and painting, you know, the face, the eyes, and some of the details. This is an example, you know, of taking their default graphics that they've given you out of the can and going through and just completely recoloring them and kind of homogenizing them across your palette so they'd work. And then I had another challenge, which was I knew I wanted to create a character that I just could not generate, and that's my crocomen. You know, that's my crocodiles that have been magically altered into humanoid forms so that they could be enslaved, and then you know, they evolve somewhat on their own to have their own little social structures, whatever. But most of the time, you spend fighting them because you know they're croco men. It's just they're gonna be bad natured and probably up to no good. And so I had to go through and figure out a way, you know, to generate kind of what I wanted at a base and then color it in, you know, recolor the eyes, you know, recolor the scales, uh, draw the tail on him. You know, they don't give you that kind of croco tail. Um, and, you know, find out for myself, is that going to look like an end product, you know, getting close enough to what I want and still looking, you know, original enough, far enough away from default. And so I ended up with these four characters where, you know, I repurposed some default content, I colored some default content, and then I took the generator and made a full-blown, you know, recoloring so that I could create a Croco Man. So that, you know, am I going to be able to get away with this for whatever little race of people I want and still have it look like it all fits inside this game? So the next video, I'm going to string some of these guys together across the screens, and we're going to start interacting with them. And I'm going to start doing window dressing on my dialogue windows, and I'm going to see, you know, again, if I can get this dressed up that it's far away enough that it looks like its own kind of thing. Um, not again, not unhappy with RPG Maker Web game engine. I think that's the more I dig into it, I think it's, you know, incredible, and I think it probably doesn't get enough recognition for its versatility. And I think that's, you know, partially because um, a lot of RPG Maker web games all end up looking the same. And so this is definitely an experiment in documenting, trying to achieve something, uh, deliberately getting away from that. I'm also want to talk real quickly about the resolution on this. I struggled a lot with the issue of resolution, and I ended up trying several different resolutions in the different tutorials that I saw, in the different videos that I saw, in different things that I read on forums, a lot of people just leaving it to, the default resolution that RPG Maker dictates. And I ended up finding a very interesting resolution, which is 960 by 576. 960 by 576. Let's see if I could be a little bit better prepared to present that information. Um, Go file new here. 960 by 576 is a resolution that is native to video. I ended up finding this information on a video forum. It's 960 by 576 is the old PAL video format. And so it's very, very widely supported across devices. And it's the perfect quarter of HD. And it just happens to divide perfectly into 48 by 48, which is the sprite size that is default in RPG Maker. It just happens to divide perfectly into 48 by 48 as 20 by 12. And this fixed so many things. It's it expands out into HD format perfectly. It fits perfectly the 48 by 48 grid of the RPG Maker web. At its small resolution, at its native 960 by 576, it'll fit on almost every device because almost every device is scaled for that old-fashioned video format, that 960 by 576 PAL. And I ended up discovering that resolution, like I said, on a video forum group as opposed to a gaming forum group, and it ended up just fitting the bill so many ways. And because of the way it expands out perfectly on HD, these graphics, they hold up. The gradients don't get jaggedy. The pixels don't get jaggedy. It scales out. It scales out at that perfect uh, uh, resolution. Yeah, it scales out 1-to-1 perfectly. So you don't end up, distorting your graphics too much. So I wanted to mention that real quick, just in case you, like me, have been scrambling around for resolution. I was running at a resolution that was like 1200 by something that was recommended by one of the more popular RPG Maker uh, designers, one of the more popular person who works a lot with plugins, and who had pretty much declared that if you wanted to use the plugins, it was going to work at this set resolution, and it just ended up being too big. There ended up being too much of the web space to take care of, too many pixels, too many characters. One of the benefits also of going with this 20 by 12 is that, it gives you a better economy to the amount of things you have to take care of on the screen. So those are my two things today. Here's my presentation of my new sprites. Let me know what you think. Check out Pixel P. I've been learning a lot of pixel painting and drawing from him. And in my next video, I hope to put these guys together, and you'll actually be able to see good old Croco Man in battle with his battler and all his different little tail wiggles and all the eye paintings. When you commit to making these generated characters, and then you say, well, I'm going to change the eyes. Well, you've got 56 times here, you got 12 times over here just walking. And so it ends up being a lot of repainting and a lot of making it look right. Bringing up his eyes, making them not the big anime eyes, but the shorter eyes, that fit, the profile that came with the face. You end up doing all these little details just to make your sprite look, a little bit less out of the can, a little bit more like it lives in the world that you've created, and making these changes, whether it's matching gold across two different colors, when the first color you had to work with was this kind of burgundy and these kind of light mauves, and the other colors that you had to work with were completely different sets of steel altogether. Getting all of these masked off by colors and repainted and recolored and matched so that they look like, you know, they work in the same place. They are wearing the same uniforms. They live in the same world. So there it is. That's all for now. Next time, we'll bring a little bit more interaction to these guys and we'll run through some combat and we'll see what we can do to dress up the screens so it looks a little bit more like it's in its own little world. Thanks so much and let me know what you think in the comments. See you next time.